Hey, this is Bishop Jackson. Just taking you into our first show, which we want to reflect upon the wonderful work of Coretta Scott King. Coretta Scott King, well, as we were moving from one month to another, February was the month where we reflected on love. And we reflected on how special marriage is. And we also especially reflected on black love. And I wanted to reflect on it because I wanted to hail, lift, and to develop our thinking around black love as well. I have to examine it because, one, I'm a participant and I'm also a result of black love. So when you say to me, talk about white love, talk about Indian love, I can't talk about that. I have to talk about black love because that is my lived experience, as they talk about this lived experience. So when we were looking through the characteristics and how we develop this, I spotted something that I wanted to say, hey, look at the length of time that Coretta Scott King committed to Dr. Martin Luther King, having been married for a not 50 years, a short amount of years. Dr. King was assassinated, murdered with a gunshot to his head on the 4th of April 1968. And Coretta Scott King worked so hard to develop the King Center, to continue the dream. And she was also a civil rights leader in her own right. In history past in the Americas. So I wanted to reflect on that as well. I wanted to also reflect on just making sure that we are balanced in our understanding of marriage, and I wanted to just look at some key things that help us in our love relationship as we finish up with our conversation on love and marriage, because we're going to be stepping into now a season of honoring black women. And I wanted to do this because I think they're so dishonored in some senses, in my view. And I know that there's a lot of things happening to really honor black women in our community and in our society, but I wanted to just give my honor to them. Black women such as Maya Angelou, Coretta Scott King, wonderful women that we have in this country. Baroness Lawrence is a woman of high stature. And there is so many great women. I just love like people like Diane Abbott, tenaciousness in the political arena, and also Dawn Butler. And I just want to honor those women who are in politics, who are working in our community or working in social services, honoring out my own wife as well, who's been married to me for over 20 years now. Praise the Lord. Amen. So I wanted to honor her as well. You know, the Bible reminds us that if a man findeth a wife, he is blessed and is favored by God. And so we want to really thank God. You know, in the beginning of the word, God said that Adam was, I think it was like a vision that God gave us to look at Adam. Adam there sitting down looking at all of the animals walking around with a cubicle partner. And as God looked at Adam in the end of chapter 1 and in chapter 2 as well, he says, it's not good for man to be alone. I've got to make him a partner, a helpmeet, to come alongside him in his dominion of the earth. And before the fall of man, God creates for Adam woman taken out of the side of man, that woman that he was blessed with. And this made Adam's life totally different. He could share his vision, share his thoughts, share his smile, share his non-communicable attributes with her as well. They shared also a covenant with God. They shared with God in the cool of the day. And so they were just a couple, they called the primal couple. They began the increase of the peoples of the earth. But in the midst of this, they had to go through a crisis in their love. They had to go through a crisis in their family, one of their children, siblings murdering each other, and then also a crisis in their relationship with God, but they still stuck together. And that's why the Bible gives us beautiful words. You know, the redactor writes and says, therefore shall a man leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife. And the two became one flesh, and they were naked and not ashamed. And that's at the end of chapter 1 of Genesis. And I always like to go from the primary text. And Jesus always refers to this. He says, no, this is how it worked out in the beginning, that God made them male and female. And this was God's beautiful partnership that he made with them. And so when we're honoring women, we as men need to just put some things in place where we are focusing on our women. One of the things that you can read a lot about Coretta Scott King in this wonderful book called Where Do We Go From Here? And Coretta Scott King writes the foreword, but then she's always involved in the talking of Dr. King, and she has her own books as well. So we'll be sharing some of what Coretta Scott King books are as well. So Coretta Scott King was, let me have a look at when she was born. She was born on the 27th of April, 1927. And that was in Heidelberg, and that's Alabama in the US. And she died on the 30th of January 2006 at age 78. I'm so glad that she lived to a ripe old age, because you hear of so many of them who passed. And so when she was born, and they used to call her Niska, so she was Coretta Scott King. So that was her maiden name, Scott. And so she's also an author. She was an activist. She was a civil rights leader. She was the wife of Dr. Martin Luther King. She was an advocate for American equality. She was a leader of the civil rights movement in the 1960s. She was also a singer and often incorporated music into her civil rights work. She met her husband while attending a graduate school in Boston. And they became increasingly active in the American civil rights movement. She rests now at the King Center for Nonviolence, and that is in Atlanta, Georgia. And so she played a most prominent part in the life of Dr. King. And so why? Because after her husband's assassination in 1968, I'm going to try and put my false teeth in, can't even say my words good. Her husband's assassination. They use that to make you not feel that somebody murdered him, but he was murdered brutally. And there's still information that's uncovered about that. She took up the struggle along with her colleagues, the struggle for racial equality. And she became active in women's movement. She founded the King Center, which Bernice King runs now, and she sought to make his birthday, Dr. King's birthday, a national holiday, which it is now. She succeeded when Ronald Reagan signed legislation establishing Dr. Martin Luther King Day on the 2nd of November 1983, and that happens each January. So she also broadened her scope to include advocacy for other rights as well, and also her opposition to apartheid. King became friends with many politicians before and after Dr. Martin Luther King's death, including John F. Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson, and also Robert F. Kennedy. Her telephone conversation with John F. Kennedy during the 1960 presidential election has been credited by historians for mobilizing African American voters. In 2005, Coretta Scott King suffered a stroke, which paralyzed her right-hand side, and she was unable to speak. 5 months later, she died of respiratory failure. And in her funeral, over 10,000 people attended her funeral. And she was temporarily buried on the grounds of the King Center until she was interned next to her husband. She was included in the Alabama Women's Hall of Fame and the National Women's Hall of Fame Center in America, the first African American woman to lie in state at the Georgia State Capitol. King has been referred to as the First Lady of the Civil Rights Movement. And so she also, her family life is wonderful as well. Martin Luther King, because we've got to honor these women, because they're powerful. Martin Luther King often called her Corrie, Correie, even when the two were still only dating. The FBI captured a dispute between the couple in 1964, where both blamed each other for making the civil rights movement even more difficult. So we see that there is a lot of information about their marriage. And I wanted to just honor her because she just carried on the work smoothly. She helped Dr. King become calm in the face of radical fighting against him. Coretta was called the refuge. She had a calm, soothing voice, and she was the rock in the marriage. As Dr. King says, she was the rock in the marriage, and especially in crises, she also had this demeanor that helped Dr. King work through his situation. After she succeeded in getting Dr. King's holiday presented, her dream for everybody. And so we find that Coretta Scott King was also a wonderful mother. She had children, and so she had Yolanda, Martin III, Dexter, and Bernice. All four children later followed their parents' footsteps in the civil rights campaigning. So I just wanted to highlight Coretta Scott King, because I think that sometimes we focus on the leader, who is a man sometimes, and then we forget the women. And I wanted to just highlight that today. I'm going to be digging up a few poems that Marcus Garvey wrote about his wife also, as well, and about women, the power of women. So I'll be digging that up as well. So when we look at how to honor women, I think the first thing is to remember that they are partners and not competitors. And I think that when we're looking at Black love, because we're moving on to the next chapter of our Black love talk, so we looked at it from the perspective of relationship and marriage before. And so I kind of put about 10 things together that I dug out of resolving conflict in marriage, just resolving some conflicts. And I think that so many times I see lots of conflict in relationships. So I want to help you with conflict in your relationships, just like I'm helping myself. And so I looked at 10 things in that, and I wanted to share those 10 things. The next time we come around, we'll share those 10 things, okay? But the thing that I want to point out, and just for this moment, is that as we go into March, we need to start reflecting on what things are negative towards our women and what things are positive towards our women. We Black men, we men need to be champion for our women. We need to be the champions. Whether you're a husband or a son or a brother or a sister, a brother, should I say. We're focusing on the men right now. When your sister needs your support, you've got to find a way of supporting them, because this is the challenge that we have. Who is supporting our beautiful Black women in their challenge to step out of the double jeopardy situation? I was going to reflect upon a book that homes in on womanist theology, which is the complement to Black theology, and it is also a Black woman's movement towards a voice in theology. And womanist theology is a if you like, a companion. It is a complementary to the black man's struggle in black theology as well. So when we talk about womanist theology, they talk about the double jeopardy of being a woman and being black in a world of misogyny, if you like. I think that's the word we were looking for. It's a long word, but I think I dug it out of the back of my head. So, which means a world that almost like disregards the woman's voice, that disregards the woman's feelings, disregards the woman's beauty. A world that ignores the work of women in critical times is a sad and dreadful world, and it needs to be readdressed. So this is just my homage to that today. I'm by no means trying to be exhaustive. I just want to give my homage to my black women. So in this first chapter, or this first verse of Rock Solid, let's remember our women who have blazed a trail, and we honor today our dear sister Coretta Scott King, who held the house together when Dr. King was assassinated and died at a ripe old age of 78, having lived her life out, pouring herself out as a drink offering before the people. Let's honor and remember her today. Thank you so much for listening, and I pray that you would just touch base with me next time as we do our next part of our Rock Solid show honoring our black women. God bless you.